Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Serena Deb, and I'm a student here at Stanford University studying political science and journalism, and it is my distinct honor to be here today to introduce Prime Minister Mark Rutte. Mark Rutte has served as Prime Minister of the Netherlands since 2010 and also as the leader of the People's Party for Freedom and Democracy, or the VVD, from 2006 to 2023. After training as a pianist, he earned a master's degree in history from Leiden University and chaired the youth division of the VVD. His prior political appointments include State Secretary for Education, Culture and Science, and State Secretary for Social Affairs and Employment. Rutte returned to the House of Representatives in 2006, and he soon became a parliamentary leader of the VVD. Rutte is the first prime minister since 1918 who is neither a Christian Democrat nor a Social Democrat, as well as the first liberal, he leads the center-right party, to hold that post since 1918. He's also the first VVD prime minister, the second youngest prime minister of the Netherlands, the longest sitting prime minister of the Netherlands, and the longest serving Western European leader. Wow, that was a lot. While serving as prime minister of the Netherlands, he continued to teach part-time at the Hague's Johan de Witt College. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Prime Minister Mark Rutte. Thank you so much. Please join me.
Good to see you all. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here today. It's an honor for all of us to get to talk to you. And welcome to Stanford University.
Yeah, second time I'm here. I was here in 2016 also for one day. So, but you were here, I hope, for somewhat longer than just 1 days.
Awesome. I first wanted to just start by asking you, what's on your agenda while you're here? What are you getting up to at Stanford University?
Yes, I'm leading a trade mission together with my colleague Jan Jambon from Flanders. It's a trade mission of high-tech companies like IMEC from Flanders, but also ASML and NXP from the Netherlands and other companies, smaller companies also, to Phoenix. So we were yesterday and the day before, we were in Phoenix, Arizona, and then we flew on to San Francisco. We arrived last night, and today is a full packed day of meetings for the companies to get to learn as many people as possible, foster new contacts with companies here in the US. And obviously, US is 20 times bigger than the Netherlands. But when it comes to, let's say, high-end, everything which has to do with the semiconductor industry, the US is still bigger. But there, the combination of Flanders and the Netherlands is playing a role with leading companies like ASML, and the other companies who are part of this trade mission. So it is really, as you would say in American English, exciting. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, it sounds like a busy schedule, and thank you for making time to talk to all of us. Before we get to the student questions, I first wanted to ask you, you've been in politics for a long time, and all the members of the audience today are students, young people, next generation of leaders and voters. Do you have a message for young people, specifically when thinking about people who might be dissuaded from going into politics or not going into public service? Do you have a message for young people? What can leaders be doing to engage young people more? What can students be doing to get more involved in politics and public service?
Yeah. Well, of course, it is extremely important that talented people get involved in politics, get involved in helping to steer the governments of all our countries on this world, on the surface of the planet. And I worked for 10 years in Unilever, which is a big consumer goods company. And my idea was to stay there till I was 50 years old and then to become a member of parliament. But I was 35 when I got the opportunity to become a junior minister in the Dutch government. And then I thought, okay, now I'm moving from a big company with fantastic people to government service, and probably the overall level of, let's say, commitment or quality will be lower. It's not true. I was really struck by the fact that it was higher. Because what is added in politics and also when you work in public life is that there is always this sense of purpose. Obviously also in companies. But in companies, it's sometimes a bit more difficult to find out what exactly the purpose is other than making a lot of money. Obviously you have these fantastic statements which come out of a Google system, mission statements of companies, which are more or less all the same. But when you then work in government life, you feel that there is really a sense of serving society. Obviously companies do the same. In the Netherlands we have Shell, Unilever, other big companies who play a big part, for example, now in the energy transition. So there is also a purpose for these companies, but I hope you will do that. Second advice I would give you is follow your own path. You will find in your life many people who will tell you what will be the wise thing to do. Be very kind to them, because they love you, otherwise they would not give you that advice. but only listen if it resonates. And if it doesn't resonate, don't say so, that's not kind, but at least don't follow the advice. Follow your own path. That's crucial.
Thank you so much for that advice. I'm sure the students appreciate it. Now on to the hard stuff. Well, this first question comes from a student who actually couldn't be here today. This comes from Liv Jinx, and I want to turn your attention to an issue that's been on a lot of people's minds recently, which is the fight to preserve and strengthen democracy. Do you believe that we are in a democratic recession? And if so, what can we be doing to prevent democratic backsliding and preserve democracy?
No, I don't think there is any sense of democratic backsliding. I'm not afraid about it. In the last Dutch elections, we had a turnout which was again close to 80%. I'm a bit worried when I saw yesterday on CNN that in the US, young people tend to vote to a lesser extent than in the last elections. That obviously is not good, but it in itself doesn't represent a backslide in democracy. And when the other guy gets elected, or the other woman gets elected of the other party, it doesn't mean a backslide in democracy. It means that you lost, which is quite natural in politics. As long as there is something to choose for, as you have societal debates which are taking place at the height of your lungs against the other person who is debating at the height of his or her lungs, and we're really making the point, of course staying extremely civil in the personal relationships, but being very tough on the issue, not on the person but on the issue. I believe our democracies are in good shape. And here in the US, you have a constitution which was wisely designed by Washington and Jefferson over 200 years ago, which is probably the smartest constitution ever written. And it makes it almost impossible, if you want to backslide, to do so. So I'm not afraid.
Thank you for that insight. And our next question comes from Santiago Paz. Santiago, are you here? Please go to the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, Prime Minister Rutte. My question is, how do you assess the recent electoral victory of the PVV in light of the current challenges faced by the Netherlands, the European Union, and the West? Challenges such as the refugee crisis, Ukraine, now pressingly as the United States warns that it might run out of funds for Ukraine by the end of the year, the Netherlands' EU membership, and crucially, the European Union's reluctance to call for a ceasefire and properly acknowledge the use of disproportionate force in Gaza.
Yeah, thank you for a very good question. We had elections in the Netherlands, as you know, probably. Well, you will not all have followed keenly the Dutch elections. That would be strange. But we had elections in the Netherlands a couple of weeks ago, and the far right of center Freedom Party of Geert Wilders won that election. That is also because about 15% of the voters of my party, right of center, switched to his party. And this has to do with the electoral system in the Netherlands, that you will always end up with coalition governments of at least 2, sometimes 3, 4, 5 parties. The present government is for a four-party coalition. And the biggest party is traditionally fielding the prime minister, so there was this worry with center-right voters that the guy leading the Social Democratic Party could become the biggest and then field the prime ministership. So for my party, there was quite a number of voters who switched. They switched to the Freedom Party, so they became the biggest. He is now on 24%. Still, he has to form a coalition. That takes time. The Netherlands is politically a slow country. We take months to organize elections and then many months to form a new government. So I was in Dubai last week at the COP28, and many colleagues asked me, what will happen? I said, well, basically you're stuck with me for some time because it takes time to form a new government. So, and all these issues like Nexit, so the Netherlands leaving the European Union or not any longer supporting Ukraine, or let's say the more anti-Islam elements in the party program of this Freedom Party, they will never make it, I'm absolutely convinced, to a government contract. And that will make it difficult to form a new coalition. We will see what happens. It could still happen. I don't know. It's very difficult to predict what the outcome would be, but I would be cautiously optimistic that these elements will not be part of a new government contract. And then, of course, we have to see how long it takes, which parties will be part of that. But that is the fascinating thing in the Netherlands. We have proportional representation. So 150 seats, when you have about 60 to 70,000 people voting for you, you have one seat. and he is on 37 seats, and the other two main parties on 25 and 24. So I don't think that you can read a trend into this. What you could read into this is that the center-left is losing ground already for some time. I believe, but I'm not an expert on this, I can only talk as a politician, it is because people are very worried about migration in Europe, and the left-of-center parties have found it difficult to grasp that issue. And when you look at Denmark, you have the Mette Frederik's Social Democratic Party of Denmark. And that party is a classical Social Democratic Party, so strong on fighting poverty, strong on a big society, but also strong on holding back on migration and making sure that only the real asylum seekers get in, and that you somehow keep a grip on the numbers. And that combination has made her very successful. And if I could have one advice for social democratic parties all over Europe and the world, it would be to have that combination of the classical social democratic values, but also to pay attention to these genuine worries people have about the fact that societal change happens because so many people come in with a different background. And in the Netherlands, we can handle 20,000 asylum seekers a year. That's the average number over the last 10, 15 years. We are now on 60,000 or even 70,000. And that is simply too high. I say as a politician, not everybody would agree. But I think if the Social Democrats would really also address that issue, the center-left could become much bigger again, which would be good for society. Not that I would vote for them, but it would restore the balance between the center-right and the center-left.
Thank you very much. Our next question comes from Henk van Voorst. Henk, are you here?
You are Dutch.
You. Yes, absolutely.
Yes. But I was just meeting with the Dutch. Yeah. You were there?
Yeah, I was standing in the back. But,
okay. So what are you studying?
I'm a postdoc in radiology and work with computer science people.
I feel so small here, yes.
I just started, so I'm also funded by the Dutch government, so that's great. Actually.
You're proud.
Thank you for that.
Well, thank you for doing it.
So my question is actually, how will any country in Europe, but specifically the Netherlands, stay competitive in the changing world and also in the current political climate?
Yeah. Well, that's a crucial question, because the Netherlands at the moment is probably in the top 3 of richest countries in the world in terms of low unemployment, state finances are healthy, and overall economic growth is acceptable, etc., etc. And we are in a strong position, but that is not a given. So if we do not defend that, and sometimes I find that not everybody understands that in the end it is somebody waking up, starting a company, or a existing company inventing something new which is relevant to people. By the way, these days in a way that it is environmentally sustainable, etc., etc., which is creating future growth for our economies. And so to make sure that you keep on and holding on to a climate in which entrepreneurship and innovation and being a bit different from the other person and following the road less traveled, if that is not part of your societal texture, then it will be difficult to maintain that competitiveness. And it will take time before it is really gone. But if it is gone, it can go very fast. So this is my worry. And of course, in the Netherlands, we are a $1,000 billion economy, so the 17th biggest in the world. And we spend a lot of money on making sure that people on unemployment or who are sick get the support we need. That's part of our European model. It's a bit different from the US, I think, but we really want to make sure that there is a sort of basic level of support for people who need that. But that also costs a lot of money. We spent about a quarter of the national income on this. But that 250 billion is not there because there is a law which says it has to be there. It is there because companies pay taxes, hire people, and these people then pay taxes. So in the end, it all starts with entrepreneurship. And that starts with having excellent people and excellent environment, and of course knowledge institutions. So also investing in your universities. Our universities cobbled together are next to the US and the UK. They're number 1 and number 2, but we're number 3 in the world, before France and Germany. But that is not a given. So we have to keep on investing in our science and technology in our universities. So all these things have to happen. I'm not very pessimistic that this will not take place, but the last couple of years I found it sometimes difficult as a politician from my pro-business party wing to see that it is more and more difficult to convince others that we have to keep on investing in this. And finally, you want the entrepreneurs to be proud of what they are doing on television. And it is more and more difficult for leaders of big institutions and businesses to do that. They don't like it because they end up in a talk show sitting next to some singer or a cabaret artist or whatever. And I said, yes, that's where I end up sometimes in the evening, because that's how I can get my message across. And that's what you have to do. That has to do with the license to operate for a big company, that you also are willing to explain why people can be proud of you and the fact that you are based in this country. But I have that debate with the CEOs for many times, and I don't get them on television. And then they start to complain, well, the business climate is not top-notch as it was before. No, but partly because you do not help. So that's also is a small part of frustration I want to share here. And I can tell you it helps talking about your frustrations. Thank you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. Our next question comes from Freek van Sambeek.
Hello. So my question is, you touched a bit on why it's important for young individuals to get involved in politics, but I would like to ask you what the best way to do that is for people in academics without switching job.
Yeah, well, you don't have to be full-time, because the political parties in my country, I think the same here with the Democrats and the Republicans, and in many countries are basically for 99% voluntary organizations, and you do not get paid. So it starts off with willing to be as a volunteer to help in a campaign or in an internal debate on some issues. And what I advise young people who are interested in politics, first of all, to seek out the party which belongs most to them. And it is not, I believe, by reading the party program. Because that's boring stuff, the party program. That's boring stuff. You go to a few of these evenings where parties come together and they're all open. You don't have to pay. You can just come in my party. You're always welcome. When new people enter, you will immediately be grabbed by the people already there. Hey, new blood, new person, great, get in. And then you can feel a sense of, is this a sort of type of people I would like to spend time with? And then, of course, when you say yes, it is still important that the philosophy is more or less to your liking. But I would advise to start with the people and then with the program, and then to become active and. It helps, and you are all students in probably the best university in the world, so I don't have to tell you this. But when I'm teaching on Thursday mornings in a high school in The Hague for 2 hours, I always try these young kids between 12 and 18 years old to get them to read newspapers, to follow the news, to be interested in societal events, because in the end, you do not want a politician who is just there to get on television. You want a politician who is quite irritated about some societal issues and wants to change them and is therefore in politics. But then you first have to find out what you're irritated about. And then that helps if you read newspapers, read books, etc. So that would also be my advice. So there's a lot to do. You have time at your hands, so you can do it easily if you're studying here. No, you will not have that time, but still do it. And I hope many of you will be participating. Who of you is American, has a US passport? Is that most in the room? So I hope lots of you will somehow participate in the US elections coming up next year, be it in the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. It will be of huge influence for this country that you do that. And then we see one of you on his inauguration day somewhere in the 1930s or 1940s. 2030s or 2040s.
Let's hope so, yeah. Our next question comes from Dylan Rivera.
Goedemorgen, Mr. Prime Minister. I did
Are you Dutch?
No, but I did an internship in Amersfoort this past summer, so I was able to work on my Dutch a little bit. My name is Dylan Rivera. I'm a fourth-year student here at Stanford studying international relations. And my question to you is, to what extent should the Netherlands work with its EU partners, especially those along the Mediterranean, to manage the flow of immigration into Europe?
Yes, well, it's crucial that we do that because at the moment there is a huge influx of migrants coming out of Africa and other regions surrounding the European Union. And that means that you really, if somebody is fleeing from a country where a dictatorship is threatening your life, then you're an asylum seeker, then you probably can stay in my country or other countries in the European Union because that's why you have asylum policies. But there are also many people coming who want to, and I understand that completely, improve themselves economically. But you cannot not host all those people. So you have to make, go into discussions with other countries. I was able myself when we were holding the EU rotating presidency in the first half of 2016 together with Angela Merkel of Germany to negotiate an agreement with Turkey on how Turkey could help to host Syrian refugees in Turkey instead of all of them coming to Germany and then quite a number of them walking on to the Netherlands or to Belgium or to Denmark. Because that was quite simply unsustainable. You cannot have millions of people come to your country and then somehow find refuge for them. So that those and then it should not only focus on migration. It has to be you have to make broader agreements, including what it means on market access for products, how you can have students from those countries visit your country, study in your universities, then go back. Circular migration, all these elements have to be part of those agreements. And again, I'm talking about countries who, from which people coming are not eligible for asylum. If they are, of course, you have a different situation. Then you cannot close an agreement with that country.
Thank you. And our next question comes from Gabriel.
Gabriel.
Hi there. Thank you so much. So I was just curious, with the ongoing energy crisis, what steps the Netherlands is taking to advance renewable energy despite all of these political and economic tensions.
Are you studying or?
Yeah, I'm doing like Earth systems and international relations. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. Yes, but we are doing a lot. So we are spending a lot of money to fight climate change, and there's always the debate that the Netherlands is only adding 0.5% to the worldwide CO2 emissions. So why do we have to do this? Well, if we all think like that, then nothing would happen. So we have to play our part, and I believe there is a positive in being a clean country, because I think people would like to live there, start a business or whatever, more than when you are a country which is polluting a lot. So there is also economic sense to it. But other than that, what we are doing at the moment is spending a lot of money to particularly our base industries. We have big steel mills, big chemical clusters, and other, and of course Shell and BP and Exxon. They have a huge presence in the port of Rotterdam. And if you would somehow force them out, you get, as we all know, carbon leakage. They will probably produce somewhere else and maybe not to the standards we can hold them to. At the same time, if you force them to immediately move to the standards you want, it's probably impossible. So we spend money to create agreements. And Mickey Adriaansens is not in this room now, but she's the Dutch Minister for Economic Affairs. So she is now in negotiations with the bigger companies to make agreements to help them with the first investments, and then of course for the company themselves to do the other investments, so that they can stay in our country. For example, the steel mill is giving employment to 10,000 people directly, 40,000 indirectly. So there are 50,000 very good reasons to keep that steel mill in the Netherlands, but at the same time it is polluting and adding a couple of percentage points to the overall national CO2 emissions. So that's the type of things we are doing. And finally, we are heavily investing in green hydrogen as a backbone for those. First of all, as a backbone for the polluting industries. And that means that we are traveling all over the world. I was in Namibia, in South Africa, Morocco a couple of months ago, together with Mette Frederiksen of Denmark, to make deals for the green hydrogen to stay in those countries, because Namibia, South Africa, they need it themselves, and Morocco, but also by investing together, also get some of that green hydrogen to the port of Rotterdam and then to my country and to the rest of Europe. So it is a mix of all those things coupled together.
Thank you so much. Sam, are you here? Take it away.
Thank you so much. You served as one of the longest standing political leaders in Europe during your time as Prime Minister. As a political leader, how do you go about making the decision that you see fit for your country for you to step down and relinquish power to the next person? I'm sure that that's a challenging decision, but what is the thought process behind it?
Yeah, a good question, and the Dutch journalists are asking it because the answer is a bit strange. No, we don't have term limits, so I'm now 13 years in this job, and I could continue the rest of my life as long as I'm re-elected. Obviously, we're still a democracy, so you have to be re-elected. But if that would take place, then I would still be in this job potentially, and I'm the longest serving in the Netherlands. But in Europe, Viktor Orban, Prime Minister of Hungary, is at the moment in the European Council of 27 EU member states serving a couple of months longer. And if you take the EU as a whole, it was, I think, Angela Merkel and Helmut Kohl who served for 16 years. So there are, I also have my seniors in this sense. And interestingly enough, you do this for a long time, you meet so many colleagues from other countries. So I had the honor to work with Obama for many years, and then with Trump, and now with Biden, and also I'm working now with my 8th Italian Prime Minister, because they have a somewhat quicker rate of changing leadership in Italy, and that makes it fascinating. For me, we had a huge debate in the coalition in June, July on migration. And for my party, the outcome was simply not good enough. So then collectively the 4 parties decided to stop, to end it. It was in good atmospherics, at least. Personally, the relationships stayed strong. We were not hitting at each other or whatever, but we came to the conclusion we needed elections. So they took place now a couple of weeks ago. And then in that weekend, I was drinking coffee. This is a real story. I'm not making it up. I was drinking coffee with a couple of friends. Most of my friends are outside politics. They are not even interested. And I was now drinking coffee with 2 friends who did not even know that the team I was leading had collapsed on Friday. We're totally uninterested. We were discussing when you go to these fairs where you can buy antique furniture. So, interesting subject. And during that conversation, somehow I thought I could also stop and hand over to somebody else. And here is the thing, that when you are in politics, but also when you are a business leader or wherever you are in a leadership position, the first thing you have to do is to make sure there is a successor. And I had a successor originally, but he decided in 2019 not to take on that role. And that is why in 2021 I stood again. Now I knew that there was an excellent successor in Dilan Yeserkus. She succeeded me a couple of weeks later after this decision in July. And I have total confidence in her. And she has an interesting background. She was not born in the Netherlands, she was born in Turkey. She came to the Netherlands as a refugee in the early 80s and was now for 2 years Minister for Internal Safety and head of the police, etc. And she did it very well. So I thought she could be a fantastic party leader. She did very well in the election. She could not prevent that last move in the last night of so many voters to the Wilders party because of being afraid of the other guy winning. That has to do with whom they think will be the 2 biggest parties in the elections itself. But this for me was an important reason. I knew there was a successor, but to be honest, it was really more a feeling than a process where you go through a checklist. And I must say, I'm not good at checklists where you have the pros and cons of a certain decision. I have always deep respect for people who can take decisions in that way. But I think, following the heart can also help sometimes.
Thank you. And before we move on to the next audience question, I'd love to follow up on that and just ask you, what's next for you now that Sam asked you about stepping down and, what's next in your future? And I'm curious if that includes being NATO chief or kind of what can you tell us about what's next for you?
Yeah, NATO vacancy comes up next year, October. And I was silly enough to quite openly discuss it in a radio program early October. That I had let it know that there was an interest from my side for that position because I thought I could be maybe of use there because there is this vacancy. There was always a debate whether also a foreign minister or a defense minister could take on that position, but somehow the conclusion was it had to be a former government leader like Jens Stoltenberg, the incumbent Secretary General of NATO. And now with Ukraine and all the instability in the world, I thought maybe I should put my name in the hat from which then a success will be chosen. But you should not speak about it before the decision has been made. So even after 13 years, you make silly mistakes. So I've decided not to take anything back from that interview, but not to add to it. Because this is not a closed session. And of course, I trust you, but I'm not sure that it then stays here. So we'll have to see what happens. We'll have to see. But if that happens, I would be happy to do that. If not, then it's over, because in politics there's nothing else in Europe. The presidency of the European Commission is in excellent hands with Ursula von der Leyen, and I'm not interested in the presidency of the European Council. So then I will stop with politics, and then probably it will be a combination of teaching. I'm, as I said, teaching in a high school, and the great thing about that is that you have impact on people. And I think you should always try to find roles and positions where it makes sense what you're doing, and it's not totally without any impact. And a couple of my former colleagues, one from the Labour Party, one from my own party, are active in seeking out what you could do to have neighborhoods which have difficulties in getting to the, let's say, to the more general level of affluency, etc. What it is, why they lag behind. And traditionally it was because you had big migrant communities, but they are now more and more integrated in society. So that's not the only reason. So there are more reasons why some communities are lagging behind. And how can you make use of the social fabric in those communities to lift them? And so I was thinking of a sort of combination of those two roles if NATO would not happen.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Do we have time for a couple more audience questions? One or two? Does anyone have a question? Would they like to come to the microphone? Yeah.
Otherwise I will give a speech, and you don't want it.
Hello, Prime Minister. My name is Shreya. I am an engineering PhD and I design nuclear reactors.
No. I'm an historian. I mean, I'm totally in awe about what you guys are all doing here. Yeah.
Thank you.
Designing nuclear reactors.
Yes.
Yes.
So,
but can you tell me, how did you get to... You woke up one day, you thought, I'm going to design nuclear reactors. No, how does that thought process work? Like me sitting, having a discussion about how I decided to end my position. How did it work?
well, my family is from a rural part of India where electricity is not an expected human right. And I wanted to solve that with the opportunities I had in the US, and I ended up on nuclear.
What a story! And then you're not from the US. You are from India.
I am
yourself?
from the US. I
You are
was
from the
born
US?
here. My parents immigrated.
They came to the US. Yeah. What a story! My
Thank you.
respect.
Well, my question then is, stemming from the incredible success of ASML, what lessons can you offer the US in implementing the CHIPS Act such that we can incentivize high-level semiconductor tech in the private sector through federal policy?
Right. Well, I think the the CHIPS Act is well designed. And it is a bit like what we are doing in the European Union. Even the amount of money we spend on it is comparable. And in the whole semicon supply chain, you need all these various companies. So you need the ASMLs, you need the ASMIs, the ESMIs. So these are two Dutch companies, but of course they have the international competitors. So wafer technology or lithography technology. There is now the whole photonics coming onto that. And you need all these various aspects. And in that sense, let's leave it with the business community itself. But the government can help by creating incentives so that particular developments will then be enhanced a little bit more. And of course, universities can help. What the US is doing, I think, better than Europe is that when you incentivize through these schemes, you do it through tax deductions. Most cases. And in case of the European Union, it is done through cumbersome subsidy programs, which create bureaucracy, etc. And I think that's something we can learn from the US on how you implement it. There was always a big worry in Europe about the Inflation Reduction Act. Oh, now the US is going national and not being interested any longer in the international supply chains. And I thought, no, it's just that the US did not realize that there was not a free trade agreement with the European Union, which is crazy because we should have had that since 1945. It is still not there. And it means that we need to get our act together. And in our time in sense of overall money, we spend almost the same on helping our economies as the US is doing. So I would never be too afraid. Most importantly, you have to keep all the supply chain lanes open. You have to keep open strategic autonomy going. You have to make sure that state aid is always limited in time and in level, because otherwise you will kill other industries who cannot compete. And the end result will be suboptimal. But no, I think the US did an excellent job in designing that CHIPS Act. And again, it is really very much compatible to what we are doing.
One more question right there.
Hello, Mr. Prime Minister. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
My name is Avinash. I'm a junior here studying economics and philosophy. So not quite as cool as building nuclear reactors. But
I can relate to this somewhat more. But
I'm glad. My question is, it's been widely noted that the U.S.-China rivalry is becoming more and more entrenched. And that places Europe in a pretty interesting position. My question is, how does that impact your decision-making and your ability to sort of work for the Dutch people and to act in their best interest, but also to act in the best interest of the world at large?
Yeah. Yes, and this is really hitting on a real issue, and that is an issue we have in Europe at the moment for some years, and that is that the European Union is not a country, it's not even a confederation, it is a club of autonomous individual member states who decided to work together on internal market affairs and other issues of common interest. Here you have this big issue of power politics and how you position yourself on the international world stage. And the US is a country, and China is a country. And for the European Union, there's always the risk that you are not a player, but the playing field. And we have to be a player. Now, the problem in Europe is that you have two very big economies, France and Germany. France is 4 times bigger than my country in terms of economic size, and Germany 5 times bigger. And in the 27 European Union economies, the Netherlands is number 5 on the list, but it is behind France, Germany, and then Italy, Spain, and then us, and then Belgium, etc. But France and Germany find it very difficult to give up on their own foreign policy. And I don't want them to do that, but they should pool more, so that you as a European Union have more of a sort of voice on the world stage. That is in general. Then particularly on China, of course, we should not be naive. We have to engage. So I was very happy with the APEC meeting and the fact that the American president and the Chinese president had some excellent talks, and it seems that personally they are fond of each other. But of course, there is a big rivalry also going on between China and the US, and that's for good reason, because, and it's not only for China, but also for other countries, you want to prevent, of course, certain developments. So there you cannot be naive. But for the European Union to be effective in that debate, it's not just us relating to what the US is doing, it is also having our own position on that, which obviously will be in many cases very close to the US position, because we are strong allies and working together in NATO and all these other organizations. But it starts here, and that has to do with the fact that the European Union needs to have more of a fist on the world stage and not just be a sort of bystander. And that is a risk because we do not pool our power.
We have time for one more. Would you like to do the honors of choosing?
The two there? Oh, because I saw them, or there's a Dutch guy sitting there, but he's not having another question. No. Not necessary. No, please. Those two, and then we. I have no idea about time.
Hi, my name's Hakeem. I'm a freshman. I don't fully know what I'm studying. My question was, so the Netherlands...
Do you not know what you're studying?
No, not really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
The Netherlands has had a very strong public transportation system. What are some ways the Dutch government supports that, and how do you think we could...
What system you said?
Public transportation.
Yeah.
What are some ways the Dutch government supports that, and how do you think we could improve it in the US?
Oh, gee. Well, I met a couple of years Pete Buttigieg. He was then responsible for transport, and I'm not going to start advising the US how to deal with that. It's so difficult, and when you would go to the average Dutch voter, he would not agree with you that it is that perfect in Holland. But we are trying. We have a patchwork of buses and railway cars and whatever, and of course a train system, a railway system, but not as perfect as you describe it. I think one of the things we are very good at is biking. And the fact that you have, like here in San Francisco, I saw many places where you had separate biking lanes. But in the Netherlands, all over the country, in every big city, you have totally separate system for biking, and you have more bikes than people. Helps, of course, that the weather is not above 30 degrees Celsius, so there's about 90 degrees Fahrenheit, I think, and you don't have hills, so it is a bit easier to come around on a bike in my country. But that helps. But no, let me not get into advising the US on public transport. I'm not an expert on it, and you have fantastic people here to do it. But are you studying that?
I was thinking something along the lines of public policy.
Fantastic. Okay, then you can tell me what we should do. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Prime Minister. I'm Joe. I'm studying business and international policy as a master's student. My question is, you've worked with at least 3 American presidents. Who have you enjoyed most working with? I did ask you, who did you enjoy, or at least enjoy working with? So, and if there is a change in administration next year, how do you think that will impact Dutch and American relations?
Well, I've always said we have to dance with the one who is on the dance floor. And I'm not a US citizen, so I can't vote. But I've worked with all 3 in a very pleasant way. So Barack Obama obviously is up there in terms of intellect, knowing the issues. And I will never forget the NATO dinners we had, where you have only the leaders, not the advisors, only the leaders sitting there, traditionally opening up by the American president, then the German chancellor. And that was a debate on how the world was evolving. And it's always interesting to see a colleague not only using his briefing papers. So he started with his briefing papers, then he would close his folder, and then he would just discuss the world issues in a way which I found very impressive. He really knew his stuff. And then Donald Trump, I found out you sometimes have to push him back a bit, and he can handle that. And I would advise, if he will be re-elected, that you have many officials in the US who can say no to him. That's not a problem. He doesn't mind. But I think some people find it difficult to do that because he can be a bit overbearing, but just do. And he's okay with that. And then Joe Biden is one of the most experienced politicians in American history. He's a senator since the early 70s. And I remember a funny phone call in 2011 when he was vice president. And he wanted to convince us to stay involved in Afghanistan. And I said, Mr. Vice President, I understand you take the train to work, because there was this famous story from Delaware that he was handing out Christmas gifts to the train drivers, etc., the railway drivers. And he said, no, I now have a whole fleet of cars and planes to travel me around as a vice president until the Republicans take it away. and that is the engaging way he works. And I had long talks with him last January in the White House and in NATO dinners. Always impressed by his enormous experience and that he can grasp back to the 70s and 80s, and he knows all these people, he knows his stuff. So let's see what happens next year. It seems that it will be Biden-Trump, I guess, and may the best one win. It's democracy, and it will always work out.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And as a final question, do you prefer talking to students or journalists?
Students and journalists. And I have to add that because otherwise I will be out of a job even sooner. No, but no. Because let's be happy with the fact that democracy is not only parliament. Democracy is also the fact that you have a vibrant public society, that you have your protests going on, and that people make their views known. As long as it's not violent, please do. And you need your journalists. They are crucial. And I hope also the US will keep its patchwork of newspapers and always impressed by the quality of US journalists. But also in my country, some of the best journalists are following what is happening in politics. And luckily, still people like to read about it.
Well, thank you so much.
Can I thank you, by the way? We have excellent.
Thank you. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Stanford to Prime Minister, and thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you so much.